Walking around a wetland in Indiana, such as this one at St. Patrick's County Park, you may notice that the water surface has what appears to be a green coating. Upon closer inspection, however, you might notice that this coating is actually comprised of millions of tiny, floating plants. These plants are called duckweed and are the subject of my postdoc research in community ecology at Notre Dame. I employ field and lab experiments to investigate the mechanisms which permit or inhibit the coexistence of ecologically similar species, such as these duckweed plants. In this community, 3 distinct species of duckweed can be found. First, Wolfia are the smallest species of duckweed, and also the smallest flowering plants on Earth. The slightly larger Lemna is the most common duckweed throughout the world, and has important uses for water purification and aquaculture. Finally, the largest species of duckweed, Spirodela, is also the rarest in Indiana wetlands. Spirodela is further distinguished by the similar Lemna, based on its unique strategy for coping with suboptimal environmental conditions. As temperatures drop, these plants produce dormant turions, which sink to the bottom of the water column, where they remain in stasis until the following spring. My research at LEEF concerns how dormancy, ecological differences, and temperature fluctuations allow the duckweeds Lemna and Spirodela to coexist in the same habitat rather than having one species outcompete the other. Current ecological theory predicts that 2 species should be able to stably coexist if their partitioning of some competitive factor, in other words their niche differences, overcomes their performance differences in a particular environment. To illustrate this, we can consider 2 species, red and blue, to have large niche differences if they do not compete for any limiting resource. This is illustrated by the separation of the red and the blue curves on the x-axis. Likewise, the 2 species perform approximately equally, as indicated by the y-axis. Therefore, these 2 species fall within the coexistence region of the main graph, as indicated by the smiley face. In a second example, the red and the blue species have perfectly overlapping niches, and so compete very heavily. In addition, the blue species has a lower growth rate than the red. These factors will cause the red species to drive the blue species to extinction through resource competition. In a final example, the red and the blue species have equal performances, but slightly overlapping niches. All else being equal, these species will compete symmetrically with one another, and coexistence is restored. Mathematically, we say that coexistence is satisfied when the following mathematical criterion is met. At LEEF, I run field experiments to assess the relative dominance of Lemna versus Spirodela using replicated artificial ponds called mesocosms. Here you can see that by starting communities with different densities of each plant, the eventual outcome in terms of community composition can dramatically change. Laboratory experiments then pinpoint the mechanisms responsible for these results, such as temperature fluctuations. I use these results to design and analyze mathematical models which predict the temporal dynamics of these simple communities. From these experiments, I found evidence that a combination of dormancy behavior, temperature fluctuations, and niche differences between these species work in concert to promote duckweed coexistence in the wild. I'm also currently investigating how aquatic microorganisms such as bacteria and fungi affect the abilities for these plants to coexist. My hope is that these studies will improve our understanding of how biodiversity is maintained in ecological communities, particularly as environmental conditions change through time. The coexistence mechanisms that I'm testing are thought to be very general and operate across a wide variety of ecosystems, from the microbial communities contained in a droplet of water to the plant and animal communities distributed across entire continents.